Well, I'm glad to be back in Israel. Every year I seem to be coming out. And I'm glad to be here, so thank you for having me. I was saying a little prayer first in Tibetan, and it's just expressing two ideas. The first two lines of the prayer express one's reliance upon the Buddha and his teachings. So if anybody in this room thinks of themselves even vaguely as a Buddhist, then you reiterate your reliance, or your refuge as they call it. And then the second two lines are expressing an altruistic, like a reason. Well, here we are, we're sort of thinking, here we are, sitting here tonight for an hour, 2 hours, I don't know how long, we'll see what happens. And we're going to be talking about Buddha's view of the world. So we're thinking, well, why are we doing this? We're going to listen to see if there are some tools here that we can use in our life. Because the point of Buddha's teachings has to be that it's practical. If it's not practical, it's a waste of time, you know. So if there are some tools here that I can take, one, to help me develop my own potential, so for my sake, but the two I can use on the basis of this, be of benefit to others. So this altruistic reason for sitting here listening to these ideas, these teachings of the Buddha. Thinking like this, I'll sing it in Tibetan. Sangye charang soke chongnam la jang sho baru dangi kyap suchi dagi chanyen gipe sonam ki drola benchir sangye drupa sho sangye charang soke chongnam la jang sho baru dangi kyap suchi dagi chanyen gipe sonam ki drola benchir sangye drupa sho sangye charam soke chongnam la jamsho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chanyen gipe sonam ki drola benchir sangye drupa sho. So why would a person want to use Buddhism in their life? What would be the point, you know? I mean, I think, you know, we have all these ideas about religion, and you see me, I'm called a nun, that sounds like religious, doesn't it, you know? So we have a lot of assumptions, I think, about religion or even spiritual teachings. So let's look at some of the ideas, some of Buddha's ideas, and in particular, can you hear me okay? Is this working all right? Sounds all right? Not kind of echoing or something? Oh, okay. Seems very loud. Maybe if I have to keep it back here somewhere. You check. You think it's on? Oh, I see.
You can use the
maybe better right here. Okay. Okay. That's all right. Okay. So, well, here I am. I was brought up in Australia as a Catholic. Since a little girl, I really liked many things about religion. You know, I loved to go to Mass every day. When I was about 12, I was on my knees begging my mother to let me be a nun, like one of my heroes, you know. But what was interesting, when I got to, I always wanted a big picture. I wanted to understand kind of the view, what God thought, what the view was, where the world came from, why this happiness, why this suffering, and these things, you know. So by the time I got to 15, I heard blues and jazz. So my religious aspirations started sort of becoming more social. And by the time I was 19, I decided I preferred boys to God. You know, if being a good Catholic, you couldn't have both. So I said, goodbye God, hello boys, you know. So then, I think for about 7 or 8, 10, maybe 9 years, it was in the late 60s, I went to England, and I was sort of ripe and ready for revolution. So I pursued my hippie approach to life, and then a more radical kind of left, kind of communist left, radical politics, and then feminist politics. And by this point, I think I found I wanted something spiritual again, and I tried church and it didn't work, and I looked at different things and tried meditation. And then when I was about 29 or 30, I bumped into a couple of Tibetan teachers, you know. So by that point, I think for me, I was really wanting a kind of full immersion in this so-called spiritual approach to life. But what I found so appealing, that one of the first things that really struck me about the Buddhist approach was the concept of no creator. So this is a big surprise to us. If we think religion, we tend to assume it means creator, you know. So then we hear about Buddhism, and you see, you know, I mean, Buddhism has as many prayers as any other religion. And, you know, like I said, here I'm a monk, there's a monk here, I'm a nun. And you ask any Tibetan person, are you religious? And, you know, yes, sure, they say. But there's no concept of a creator, so it seems kind of a contradiction. Because I think the typical view in the world is religion equals creator. So I know for myself, when I look back on my Catholic upbringing, it was really, I never thought of God as a creator. It was more, it was quite different. It was more like a Buddhist approach, you know. So that was one of the main things that I really felt very attractive about the Buddhist teachings. Which, of course, then the implication of that, when one really follows the teachings, is that there's an enormous, it demands accountability, because the Buddha would say that we are responsible, individually, each one of us, by our own actions, our own thoughts, our own experiences, every moment of what we think and feel and do and say. This is the very process of karma that, if you like, is the creative kind of principle in Buddhism. That we are the producers of ourselves, you know. So I found even just this idea extremely appealing, the idea of accountability, the idea that it's up to me, you know. So then, I mean, my first teachings were from Tibetan Buddhist. And I didn't have any real concept of different kinds of Buddhism. And it's only since I started studying Buddhism that I've got any sense of, you know, that I've developed any understanding of the different approaches that have been cultivated over the centuries in Buddhism. So in the Tibetan tradition, the Mahayana tradition, there's this really nice analogy that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. And I find that extremely appealing. I find that a really nice way of presenting all the Buddha's teachings from like A to Z, you know, all the Buddha's approach to life. And the wisdom wing is where you do all the work on yourself. You know, this is where you really learn to know your own mind, become your own therapist, as one of my teachers put it. Really knowing, you know, your own mind, using Buddha's model of the mind, and this is Buddha's expertise. The mind is what Buddha deals with. And this is, again, a big difference between Buddhist religion, if you like, and other spiritual paths. He doesn't have any concept of a thing called a soul. He talks about the mind. In other words, you could say that Buddha's a psychologist, you know, but he's got this very radical or a radically different view about mind. So you could say in the wisdom wing, which is if you like, broadly speaking, the Buddhism that we know about that's in the countries called Burma and Thailand and you know, the so-called Theravadan Buddhism, you could say that. This is the wisdom wing part. And then you've got the compassion wing, which is like, if you like, the political wing, the action wing, where you sort of put your money where your mouth is. Having cultivated your own qualities in the wisdom wing, you then get out there and benefit others, you know. So this kind of, I like this analogy. It seemed that it makes sense to me. I mean, since I was always younger, and because I was always politically active, the idea of action and doing something to be a benefit to others always made sense to me. But then what I really realised when I started cultivating a Buddhist approach to life was what I'd always missed out on, what I didn't have in the past, were methods to help me become a better, more reasonable person, you know. I was trying to do the compassion wing, but without looking into myself. And what I've gotten from Buddhism, which I think is utterly fundamental, is if I want to even lift one finger to help one being, even a dog, I have to have the wisdom to know how to benefit them. And I'll only have that if I work on myself. It's like if I want to help people learn music, I have to learn music first. You've got to do the thing first yourself, then you're qualified to help others. This, for me, makes a lot of sense, you know. And so the wisdom wing is where you deal with your mind. You learn to be your own psychologist. You learn to be your own therapist. And like I said, this is Buddha's expertise. It's often hidden, you know. We have so many cliched ideas of what a Buddhist is, and we have really very cliched ideas about what meditation is, and these ideas of a person being very mindful and walking slowly, and you know, and somehow that very, you know, cliched notion. It's fine, but it's hardly the point. It's hardly the essential point. And even the ideas mostly that, you know, it's quite common in the world now, people using various Buddhist meditation techniques, you know, mindfulness techniques. This is utterly marvellous. But this is like a tiny, it's the tip of the iceberg, really, of Buddhist psychology, of the depths to which Buddha's understanding of the mind really go, you know, and the levels to which we can unravel this mind. and really learn to know its contents. Because this is fundamental. This is what is necessary, you know. So Buddha's deal is, he says, we've all got this potential, all got this natural potential, phenomenal potential. It's radical if we compare with the usual materialist views of what we've got, the potential we have. We've got this astonishing potential, he would virtually say, for perfection. This you could say is the Mahayana view, or the terms they use in the Mahayana. They would say we all possess Buddha nature, which seems a pretty cosmic idea, you know. But on a simple level, what this means is every person in their mind, in their consciousness, their mind, possesses this innate potential for the full development of what we would simply call the positive qualities. There's nothing esoteric about it. I mean, we really do mystify this stuff. And when we read the Asian teachings, the Japanese or the Tibetan or the Thai, because Asian culture speaks in such a different way than we do in our contemporary world, it's so easy to mystify this stuff, you know, make it all sound all kind of holy and in the sky. But it's so extremely important to get it right down to earth, to be really practical and really grounded, and to see that what we're talking about here, what Buddha's talking about, is something extremely doable. That basically, if it's not able to be done, if it's not able to be practiced by a person, then it's wasting time, you know. You've got to put your money where your mouth is. So what is he saying we can do? Well, he's saying that every living being, just by definition of existence, possesses this potential, and this is the Mahayana take on it. Literally, you could say for perfection, you know. So my Catholic mother was a bit offended by that, because of course, if one is religious, one usually says God is perfect. And it seems extremely arrogant to suggest that anything other than that. But this is Buddha's view, that every living being possesses this natural potential to fully develop what we can simply call the good qualities. Wisdom, love, contentment, joy, happiness, clarity, compassion, forgiveness, you name it. The qualities that when we hear them, we know they're kind of cool. If you're on the receiving end of these qualities, we know they're the good ones. If you identify any of those within yourself, you think they're fine, you know. So Buddha's fundamental point is that every one of us possesses naturally the potential to develop these to the nth degree. And necessarily also to remove from our mind utterly, not slightly, not a little bit, but finally, absolutely, to remove completely from our mind all the so-called negative qualities. And again, we know these well. There's nothing mystical about them. Anger, fear, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, arrogance, and all the actions that come as a consequence of this, which is the cause of all the suffering on this earth, we can see. So the Buddha's view, very simply, his idea is, his proposition, and this is what Buddhist practice consists of, is the job is to fully develop the goodness and get rid of the badness. It's a really simple way of putting it. And so, of course, where does that exist but in the mind? We're not talking about something secret or holy or mystical like a soul. Buddha's view of the mind is very, very practical. But also, like I said, he's got a much more radical view, one, of what our mind's potential is, and two, actually, of what mind is even itself. I mean, it's a very common word, we all use it. But for the Buddha, the word mind doesn't refer to our brain, which is a big surprise, because that's the usual way. You know, we think of it as this thing in the head here. So the Buddha would say necessarily it is not physical. So one has to, take this as one's hypothesis, not just blindly believe it or reject it. And that's very much the approach that one would take to listening to Buddha's teachings, and indeed even practicing them. Because Buddha's not a creator, he would assert there is no such thing as a creator. In fact, he says we don't need creating. It's like an unnecessary addition. He says, given that he's not a creator, then of course he's not demanding that we believe what he says. And this is a really crucial point. If we follow through logically the idea that if Buddha's not a creator, then what is he? Where did his information come from? It wasn't revealed to him, which is how we tend to think, God gives the information to somebody. No concept like that in Buddhism. The information that is called Buddhism has come from the experience of the person called Buddha, from his own research, from his own experience. And this is a really crucial point. So therefore, to believe Buddha is ridiculous. If you listen to Einstein explain to you his findings, you know it would be absurd if he demanded you believe him. And you know perfectly well too, Einstein was those things that we call, the things that he found, like relativity or equals mc squared, whatever. We know perfectly well that it wasn't revealed to him from someone in a dream, or he didn't have a vision of it. He discovered from his own experience that this is how things are. So he presents it to us, and then it's up to us to not just blindly believe it, but to investigate it. And that's the crucial point. You can believe Buddhism if you like. No one's saying you shouldn't. But, it's like believing that 1 and 1 is 2. What good is that? Doesn't help you. You might as well learn to understand it and discover then yourself its truth. This is the Buddhist approach. So the way to listen to Buddhist teachings, or the way to apply them, is to take them as your working hypothesis. That's really the way to say it, So Buddha's view of the mind is it's not physical. It's not given to you by somebody else, a creator, or your mummy and daddy. Buddha says they give you a body. How kind. But they do not give you a mind. So the Buddha's view is our mind is ours. So of course the question is, where does it come from? And we might go into this tonight or not. We'll see where we go. But the idea that we take as our hypothesis with Buddhism is that your consciousness comes from before. It's a beginningless continuity of mental moments, like a river of mental moments that goes back and back. And so if you can trace yourself back to conception, you'll trace your body back to your mummy and daddy. Thank you, mummy and daddy. But you'll trace your consciousness, not back to them. Your mind, your consciousness, not to them or to a superior being or just to nothing, but to previous moments in itself. Well, maybe we'll go into this. We'll see where we go with this. But the mind, the general idea in Buddhism is the mind. Our mind is our own. And so, if my mind is mine, I need to know its contents, because the Buddha is saying I've got this innate potential to develop my mind to perfection, to completely rid it of the neuroses and therefore the causes of all my suffering, and to develop to the nth degree the positive qualities. This is the simplest way of saying what Buddha is saying, basically, and this is the basis of a Buddhist practice. So therefore, if my mind does have this marvellous potential, then I'd better learn to know it, hadn't I? Because I have to do the job. So that's why the more we think about this, it's absurd to think that merely believing this is somehow some methodology. You know very well anything you like, whether you want to learn about cooking or mathematics or music or ballet, just believing in it is completely insane. Believing in cake making, what good does that do you? You have to understand it, you have to know the recipe, and then you have to try it out for yourself. So to believe in something for the Buddha is a very weird idea. To merely believe is absurd. It's fine, it'd be quite helpful. I mean, to believe in something that's useful, that's okay. But finally, one has to actually put it into practice. And that's a process of two things. Making it experiential, but necessarily verifying it. So your working hypothesis then will eventually become your own experience. And this is really it's an extremely important point. This is why even, we can go and study Buddhist philosophy very nicely in many universities around the world now. You can have a head full of very good Buddhist knowledge. Marvellous. But if it's not practiced, if it doesn't transfer from the head to the heart and become experiential, then it's not a waste of time, but it's almost a waste of time. It's like learning lots of recipes and telling me you're a cook, and I'll say, great, make me a cake. Oh no, I can't do that. Then it's not much good, is it? So we have to have, we have to learn to know how to understand what our mind is, at least initially take it as our working hypothesis, and then learn to develop skills that enable us to know this mind. This is clearly important, because if what's in my mind is the source of my happiness and my suffering, which is essentially what he's saying, and this is another crucial point about Buddhism. This is the essential point that's at the basis of all Buddhist practice. That what's in my mind is the basis of my happiness and my suffering, which is a big surprise to us, because we always believe it's the person out there, the event out there, the thing out there that is the main cause of my happiness and the main cause of my suffering. And this is the default mode of the world. Dogs believe this, humans believe it, Jews believe it, Christians believe it. Well, if we're really good Jews and really good Christians, we wouldn't. I suppose you must have if you're a really good Jew, you'd say it's all God's will, wouldn't you? That's the best Jew, isn't it? I mean, I think 99% of Jews don't do that. 99% of Christians don't do it. And probably 99% of Muslims don't do it. I think it's an amazing view. If you want to be... that's my feeling. If you're going to have the view of a creator, to really, let God do his job and mind your own business and just get on with it, and then do and accept that whatever is God's will is God's will. It's a pretty stunning view, actually, to have of the world. I think you'd be a very happy person if you did this. But, we kind of want it both ways. We're happy to say God creates everything, but then we want to complain, and blame everybody else. So anyway, the Buddha's view is different, because he doesn't assert as a creator. So the Buddha's emphasis is on on our own mind, and because he has this view of consciousness being something that comes from before, and this philosophy in Buddhism is called karma, which we might or might not get into, we probably will. That we're the creators of our own self. We are the creators of our own reality. This is really Buddha's creation view, if you like. We are the creators, he says. You know, that what we're experiencing, this is now karma I'm talking about, what we're experiencing in our lives, whether it's labelled positive or negative, happy or suffering, there are causes out there, the people who drop bombs on us, which I've been hearing people have just been doing recently, you know, some tragedy down south. And this is just, look at the world, it's happening every single day. Or if it's not that, it's the husband punching you in the nose. If it's not that, someone taking your wallet. If it's not that, someone's raping you. You know, there's always something going on. The suffering in the world is pretty intense. So the commonest view we have, the default mode explanation, is that that's why I'm suffering. And then equally, why I'm happy is because you give me $100, you're very kind to me, she takes care of me, my husband loves me, my children look after me. We always seem, you know, the view we seem to have, and this is the view of the world, not just humans. Animals respond this way as well. The assumption we seem to have is that what happens out there is the main source of our happiness and the main source of our suffering. So, of course, what that demands is we continue to try and get the nice things in our life, because that's what causes happiness, and to try and push away and avoid, if we can, the bad things. This is pretty instinctive in all of us, you know. This is common behaviour. So Buddha's take on this is quite different, you know. Actually, not so different. I remember I was participating in a conference, in a one-day seminar in Florida. And the topic was, why do bad things happen to good people? And there was me, a rabbi, a Catholic priest, and a Lutheran minister. Well, it was easy for me. I just went blah, blah about karma, you know. And maybe I keep saying maybe, but we probably are now. We're going to be talking. I'm feeling myself heading towards karma. I can't help it. But what was interesting was, at the end of my little talk, the rabbi clapped and he said, we agree with you. We think the same thing. And I think most of the people in the audience were a bit shocked. And he said he was a Kabbalah rabbi. I don't know much about Jewish philosophy, I'm sorry to tell you. But he said basically they had the same view. And he said his mother, I think his mother's, he was Israeli. And he said his mother never had one bad word said against the Arabs in her house. She said, I think he said that. And then he said, every time something bad happens, we have a saying. Great, he said. One less debt to repay. So I don't know what the words are in Hebrew. Obviously they're not the same as Sanskrit. You know, karma is a Sanskrit word. But I found that really quite fascinating. I'd never heard that before. Anyway, the Buddhist view is, if we're not created by a superior being, and if mummy and daddy didn't make us, which is the materialist view, the default mode of the materialist view, and therefore the person to blame, we love to blame our parents, you know, then what's Buddha's take on it? Well, Buddha's take, like I said, is that we've all got a mind which is not physical, which doesn't come from a superior being, which doesn't come from mummy and daddy, but continues back and back itself. It's a process of cause and effect. You know, this moment of my consciousness comes from a previous moment. You get right back to conception, you go to a previous moment before this, and you go back to a previous life, and so on. So the idea of reincarnation and continuity of consciousness is a fundamental, it's like an essential point in Buddha's view, you know, Buddha's philosophy of the world, Buddha's explanation. So I have to say one thing. I know that when I first heard the Buddha's teachings, I found this view really appealing. I found it, because it's this one of accountability, you know. Extremely powerful. And because I'm a Tibetan Buddhist and one studies the philosophy quite deeply in Tibetan Buddhism, which is certainly what I wanted to do as a basis for my practice, then, you know, to get our head around this presentation, which is in all the Buddha's, you know, teachings, and the pre-Tibet, pre-Japan, pre-Thailand, right back at the beginning, all the, you know, the tradition is all there in all the Buddha's teachings about about karma, this law of cause and effect. And so on an experiential level, this is quite intense. It's like, you know, as one Lama said, everything is out. If we have this view, if we attempt to practice according to this view, you're doing two main things. I kind of like think of these as the two pillars of Buddha's teaching. And this is all the wisdom wing still we're talking about here. I'm not even talking about the compassion wing yet, you know. I'm not talking about the compassion wing yet. This is still the wisdom wing, the work one does on oneself, you know. There's two essential things. One is to understand the nature of mind, how it's mind, and to understand its contents. And that's absolutely fundamental. And I'll discuss this. And then the other one is to have our head around, at least get an idea of this presentation of this idea of karma, or cause and effect. that everything that we experience, the main cause of it, not the secondary, the main cause of it is one's past actions. So all the happiness that I have is a result of my own virtuous actions, and all the suffering I have is a result of my non-virtuous actions. It's a simple point, a simple concept, utterly different from how we think. So it's an easy thing to say. A 5-year-old could say it. But to get our head around that concept and use it as the basis of one's life takes quite a shift, massive shift. But this you could really say is the basis of an effective Buddhist practice. But that, just believing in it is not enough, like I said. The experiential side has to come from knowing your mind. So let's look at this. Let's look at the mind. What is it? And how does it function? Using Buddha's model of the mind. And how does it have this, what is logical about this? Not just to believe it as some interesting point, but what is it about the mind that if we look into it, we can see that it's logical, that we can cultivate the goodness and get rid of the badness. So first of all, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to lessen our anger or our jealousy or our attachment or our fears or our low self-esteem? Why would we want to become familiar with that in my own mind and lessen it? Why would I want to? And why would I want to become familiar with the kindness and the clarity and the wisdom and the love and the forgiveness? Why would I want to become familiar with this, and why would I want to cultivate it? What's the simple logic behind this? Not because somebody says I should. Absolutely got nothing to do with Buddha saying you should do it. Remember, he's not a creator. He's simply, from his own experience, pointing it out, that he says that if you look into your mind, you're going to find that the stuff that's called the goodness is actually the source of your happiness. And the stuff that's called the badness, that's the source of your pain. And indeed, of course, the source of why you harm others. It's really not a complicated concept. But I think because we're so caught up in guilt and fear and blame and, all this kind of thing, it sounds quite heavy to have the view of karma. That, oh yeah, my suffering is a result of what the bad things I've done in the past. But that my happiness is a result of the good things I've done in the past. That's the idea. So the Buddha's view, as far as the mind is concerned, is to investigate the simple statement he's making. And then when you study Buddhist psychology in depth, one can really look into what are the characteristics of the negative states of mind. How do they function? Why do they cause me suffering? What is it about them? And then indeed, of course, the crucial question, how can I diminish them eventually to get rid of them? That's the real job, Well, there are two main characteristics of the negative states of mind. So first of all, one point in Buddhist psychology, which is quite different from the view we tend to have in all the various models of the mind in our culture, and there are certainly many of them. We know this, since the time of Freud. There's hundreds and hundreds of different viewpoints about mind. So the Buddha's fundamental point, and this is quite different, I think, is that he makes this absolute distinction between what we're referring to here as the so-called positive and the so-called negative states. And he would, we give equal status to these. So we would assume, that a person is, you're a reasonable person if you have a bit of anger, a bit of jealousy, a bit of love, a bit of compassion, a bit of depression. But as long as you're fairly rounded in all of those, then we feel that's a reasonable human being. As long as you've got these fairly under control, not too angry and not too this or too that, we feel then you're a reasonable person. But I think there's an absolute given in all these models of the mind in our contemporary world that we do not question. That the anger, jealousy, fears are normal. You're a reasonable, normal human being if you have this. In fact, we would think you are abnormal. We would think you were mentally ill if you didn't have them. And this is Buddha's view is, I tell you, radically different. And it really does need thinking about, because it's quite a shock to hear it. But what he's saying is that, in fact, anger, depression, attachment, fear, jealousy are completely abnormal. They are the signs of mental illness. He would have liked that phrase, mentally ill, So his view of the potential that we've got to be mentally healthy, his view of mental health is quite radical. He's saying you're really mentally healthy when you're an enlightened being, when you've fully developed goodness and got rid of all this rubbish. Because he says, and this takes time to look at, that this stuff, these so-called negative states of mind, are not at the core of our being. They're not They're not fundamentally in our being. They're there, they run the show right now. You check your own life, check the world. We all know anger, jealousy, fear, depression, despair, you name it. They're there all the time, sometimes more strong than others. But we recognize them deeply. And so, of course, we can be forgiven for assuming they're normal. They're at the core of our being. And therefore cannot be rid. Our mind can't be rid of them. But this is Buddha's point. This word nirvana sounds so holy, like in the sky. It's not. It's a word that you can use, broadly speaking, to refer to a mind who has accomplished this job of removing neuroses. Cessation of suffering. That's what he means by that. Cessation of suffering. He's talking psychologically. There's not some holy place like heaven. He's talking psychologically. So the job of being our own therapist, you really could say, whether you're practicing the Theravada path, you're practicing the Zen path, you're practicing the Tibetan Buddhist path, whichever. It's the fundamental first step. It's like, if you think of it, there's a way that the Tibetans package all Buddha's teachings. And Dalai Lama recently was just putting it this way, and this is how I like to say it as well. It's like, it's like if you get educated at any level, you start with junior school, then you go to high school, then you go to university, then you do postgraduate. Well, there's a way very comfortably of presenting, and this Tibetan packaging presents all of Buddha's teachings in this experiential way, So at the very first level, this wisdom wing, this is junior school and high school, you could say. Junior school and high school. The work of working on yourself, knowing your mind profoundly, identifying really clearly, and distinguishing the positive and the negative, and learning to distinguish between them. And this is the tricky part, because, for example, I will say, "Oh, I love you." We recognize those words, That's a wonderful thing to hear. But what the Buddha's saying is that there's some negative states of mind in there, and there are some positive, and they're completely mixed together. And even in our culture, we assume they mean the same thing. So the negative ones. And this is the default mode of daily life. According to Buddha's view in the Four Noble Truths, the effective main cause of our day-to-day suffering is something that's the word is so simple, so cute, so ordinary. It's called attachment, And every one of us in this room would probably have a different definition of it, even if we use the word at all. But this is absolutely crucial to understand from Buddha's point of view. And it's not how we think of it. So this is one of the negative states of mind. And it has all these negative states of mind have two main characteristics. Negative, not in a sinful sense. Don't hear in that way like you're a bad person. Negative insofar as they are the source of your pain. They're why you suffer. And of course are why you harm others. Look at the world. So this attachment is a really necessary one to investigate. But as one of my teachers said, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. You'll never begin to understand it until we really build something up in our own mind, It just takes time. We use it in a very superficial way. Oh, I'm so attached to chocolate cake, we'll think, But it goes to quite profound levels in the mind. And as like I said, you can almost say it's the default mode. So what is it then at this more deep level? Well, first of all, the two main characteristics of these so-called negative states of mind. One is that they're extremely disturbing. And I think this is easy to prove. Check the last time you were depressed, jealous, fearful, angry, craving for something. If you look into your mind, if you look into your feelings, you know it wasn't comfortable. It's called disturbing. Guess what? It's pretty evident. We don't say, "Oh yeah, I was jealous yesterday and it was just great." We don't say that. We know it's painful, and this is the point the Buddha's making. So don't think about it kind of in a judgmental, negative way, like you're a bad person, which is how we think of this stuff. It's really not the point. We're trying to investigate why we suffer. This is Buddha's first step. He says we all have this unbearable suffering, and we've got this marvellous potential to be free of it. But where we have to look is in our own mind. So, the first characteristic of these unhappy states of mind is that they're disturbing. And that can be quite hard to see sometimes when it's the default mode, when it's there all the time. And attachment is very hard to see because it's very hard to identify it. But we'll talk. So then the other characteristic, which is most interesting, is these unhappy states of mind are delusional. They're liars. They're misconceptions. They're not accurate assessments of whatever it is. So you've got, if this chocolate cake is in front of you, if you have attachment to it, what Buddha means by that is this. Well, first of all, primordially in your own being, it comes from this deep sense of neediness, this kind of aching sense of not being enough, not having enough, always wanting something more. And so, of course, that's the at an energetic level, that's attachment. And then what it does is dump itself on something, or it's looking for something, like hankering after something. So this is all really quite subtle. It happens, it's like there, deeply inside us. We hardly even give a name to it, But there's this sense of discomfort, this sense of not having enough, wanting something, needing something in an anxious, neurotic way. So then we look for something, we find the cake, and then we dump on the cake. So then what it does, it then projects onto the cake, and this attachment in the mind has then the function of causing the cake to look extremely delicious. Now this is a big surprise to us. We don't think that our mind is making it look delicious. We think it is delicious, that's why we're hankering after it. But the Buddha says it's the exact opposite. There's the neediness inside us, this aching sense of not having enough, that's looking for something out there, and it grabs the chocolate cake, and it's like you've got your rose-coloured spectacles on. The cake will look delicious. Then the next aspect of attachment is that you'll then crave to get it. And instinctively, there's this assumption that when I get it, I'll get happy. When I get it, it'll alleviate this ache. It will fill the hole. Therefore, we shove the cake in, waiting for happiness to come. So, attachment has this aspect of neediness, emotional kind of lacking inside somehow, a sense of not having enough, not being enough. It then projects onto things and makes them look more delicious than they really are. It then causes us to hanker after it. It causes us to believe that when I get it, I'll get happy. It then causes us to massively expect the cake to make me happy. You build up all this expectation, but then you put it in the mouth and you discover it's something else completely revolting. You want to vomit. You've got to get really upset. So when attachment doesn't get what it wants, it turns into anger or aversion or fear or despair or even depression, And so the Buddha says this attachment and anger or aversion, which is this basic state of mind beneath what we call anger or depression when it's internalized. We go in between these 1,000 times a day. These are the default mode. They're the flip side of the coin. Attachment and anger. Attachment and anger. And, we go up and down like yo-yos 1,000 times a day, like little mini bipolar episodes. I'm not joking. So as long as we keep getting what attachment wants, then life is cool. Because we call that happiness. But Buddha, it's a bit depressing, in his little package called the Four Noble Truths, in the first noble truth, he describes what suffering is. The first one is like in-your-face suffering. Punches in the nose, war zones, terrorists, mean husbands, horrible bosses, you name it. When you don't get what you want, that's what the regular suffering is. And we all know that one. Buddha even calls it the suffering of suffering. But the second one is a bit depressing. We call it happiness. It's when you do get what you want. But the Buddha says it's a subtler level of suffering. It's like a honey-covered razor blade. It's like the happiness that the junkie gets. The happiness that the addict to cigarettes gets. So it's the junkie mode. And this is because of attachment. Attachment is like being in the junkie mode. But he says we're all junkies. It's just a question of degree. It sounds radical. It sounds extreme saying it this way. But the more we understand this attachment, this neediness, this hankering, this always yearning for something, always thinking something's missing, always wanting something more, and then no matter what we get, never being satisfied. As my mother said, she used to tell us, I used to think about it, the more you get, the more you want. And this is the cruelest cut of all when it comes to why Buddha says attachment causes suffering. On the face of it, attachment to cake, seems like it's the cause of happiness. You get the cake. But he says that we analyse that experience more deeply, which somehow we don't want to do. It's a bit depressing, because it's the only way we know how to get happiness. And then Buddha's telling us we can't even have this. We think, well, come on, it's not fair. But he says if we look into our minds more deeply, we look into our own experiences, we're going to see that this craving that's deep inside us, completely instinctive. We don't sit there very logically, doing it. It just drags us to the cake. The expectation that it'll make me happy is really strong. We put it in the mouth waiting for the happiness to come. It doesn't come the first mouthful. We put another mouthful in. It doesn't come the first piece. We put a second piece in. We keep kind of waiting for the satisfaction to come until eventually what happens? You've had 3 pieces and you're stuffed, So you're not satisfied. Now you feel depressed because you ate too much and you've got a full stomach. So we somehow know this. It kind of sounds cute, a bit like a cliche, but we know this. So where's the mistake? And this is what he says, we have to learn by being out, by learning concentration meditation, one of the fundamental techniques that's around pre-Buddha. It's around thousands of years before the Buddha. Hindus were expert at it, Learning this very simple way to focus the mind in order to then do the insight, to do the cultivation of being one's own therapist by utilising this clarity, this skillful, focused mind, in order to see one's own mind itself. And this is the thing. Like if we think of therapy in our culture, you go to your therapist and you've got problems. And then what we discuss mostly is the external events of our life. The mother, the father, the family, the boss, the boyfriend. It's about learning about our jealousy and our fears, but the thing we are so convinced is the main cause of those things is out there. Whereas the Buddhist approach is quite tasty actually, is that it's fine to look at your family, look at what your mummy did, look at what the Catholic Church did, look at the abuse you had, or look at the good things even. It's fine to look at the external conditions, but this is not enough. We've got to learn to look at our mind itself. And that means the qualities within our mind. And that means you have to have a sound basis for looking at these. So if you want to study Freud's psychology, you go, you use him. Use Freud, use Jung, use whoever you like. Here we're using Buddhas. And so he's very clear in the way he presents how the mind functions, what a negative state of mind is, what a positive one is, what its characteristics are. So obviously one needs to learn that first, and one has to have agreed that you want to use Buddha's model. That's your choice, Then you use this as the basis for your own internal investigation of that state of mind. That's the way, so it's extremely, extremely tasty that you're looking into your own mind itself. You're seeing how your own attachment works. You're seeing and you're hearing the voices of all these crazy states of mind, which are running 1,000 miles an hour. So fast, so quick, so many, so deep, So it's a job that just takes a lot of time. And it's we often can be very, among Buddhists too, be very superficial. We can talk a lot about developing mindfulness, which is a technical skill, connected to cultivating concentration. And sometimes it's commonly thought among even Buddhists as well that by doing mindfulness meditation, you're going to really learn to help change your mind. Well, you're only going so far. You could be, you want to be a better gardener. So you've got to be mindful. You've got to learn to recognize. You've got to learn to look at your garden carefully, just like you have to look at your mind carefully. But if you can't recognize, if you can't label what you're seeing, if you can't, you can be very mindful of that very big garden out there. But if you can't tell a weed from a flower from a herb, you're very limited what you can do. So if you can be very mindful and watch your breath very nicely and calm your mind down, but if you don't know how to label exactly what you're seeing, you can't go far. But if you combine mindfulness if you imbue it with intelligence, with a view, there's a weed, there's a herb, there's a flower, and you really observe. So we need these two we need these two kinds of meditation. We need concentration meditation, which is simply this marvelous psychological skill. Like I said, has been around well and truly before the Buddha. He took it from the Hindus, They were experts at it. Of really cultivating this extraordinary psychological level of psychology, level of mind, that enables us to go to quite a subtle, more refined level with extraordinary clarity, extraordinary concentration. It's an amazing technique, It's remarkable, actually. And it's astonishing to me that there is a bit more these days, people using it, but it's just this extraordinary psychological skill. Like I said, it's been around for thousands of years. We need it desperately. Everybody needs it, And it's got no religious overtones whatsoever. It's a practical psychological skill. But that's the first step. Then one needs to imbue that with some kind of intelligence so that when we do utilise a clear mind to observe the mind itself, you know how to identify what you're seeing. You hear all these thousands of little voices. You think of it, your head's full of 1,000 voices: attachment and jealousy, anger, depression, love, kindness, wisdom. And there's so many going so fast in this mind of ours. So part of the problem is, this job we're discussing is not complicated. But here we are, we're not 5 years old, We're halfway through our lives, if not 2/3, if not close to death, And what attention have we given to our mind? Very little. You check in our culture, even now, the only time we look into our minds is the only time we go to a therapist is when we've had a mental breakdown or we can't cope anymore. That's a terrible way to lead our life. You don't run your car like that. You have methods to make sure your car runs nicely before it collapses on the highway. You don't wait till it collapses on the highway to go put gas in it and oil and have it checked up. You have maintenance, We don't know how to maintain our own mind because we just assume, oh, well, I'm born, I've just got to be a nice person and cross my fingers. And we wonder why we're so depressed we can't get out of bed one morning. We wonder why the words vomit out the mouth and we realise we're overwhelmed by anger. We haven't noticed before because we haven't noticed underneath the gross level of emotion. We just only know what we're thinking when it comes out the mouth, It's a bit late. So we need to learn to go deeply inside. And I don't mean it to sound holy. It's not. It's just a necessary job every human being needs to do. Because I have to lead my life. And if I can't be in charge of my mind and know what's inside me before it comes out the mouth, before my hand does the job, then I'm going to be in trouble. Again, look at the world, Ten to 9. Ask me some questions. Please, if you'd like. Yes, we've got a mic. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
First, I want to say that you should come more than once a year.
Oh, okay.
And you talked about why bad things happen to good people.
Yes.
And I want to share with you that I find myself getting angry or jealous, and that good things happen to
bad people. No, I understand exactly. Very good point.
My question is, wait. If you say that the anger is the other side of the coin of attachment, is it possible to be attached to a truth way or valued way?
I understand. Of course it is, but when we really realise the difference between attachment to something and merely seeing its benefits and happily pursuing it, then we'll really see that there's nothing wrong with that. It's marvellous to want something that's beneficial. So there's a big difference between attachment to something and wanting something. There's a massive difference between attachment to chocolate cake and enjoying it. There's a huge difference between attachment to a person and loving them. But the trouble is they always come together and it's very hard to distinguish. So put it like this. If you're really attached to a truth, then it won't last because attachment gets bored very easily. And then you'll get very offended when things don't go right and you'll give it up eventually. So wanting something and seeing its benefit and then pursuing it with a lot of enthusiasm, it doesn't follow that that's attachment. It doesn't follow at all. And that's why we have to learn to know our minds, though, to distinguish between them, because attachment's got very particular, neurotic, frantic, it's anxiety-based, it's fear-based, it's I-based, it's needy, it's neurotic, it's miserable. It's very, very vivid and clear when we can see it, But it's mixed with love and mixed with the good things right now, so it's hard to see it.
So, I just want to see if I understand.
Yes.
I find myself very angry, really angry when people goes like they do something wrong or in the wrong way and they achieve more than people who doesn't.
I understand. Yes, I do. I understand.
And maybe it's also karma.
Well, okay, I mean, we haven't really gone into karma yet, but if you want to, we can. But it's, of course, it's. If you want me to, I can answer.
Yes,
okay. But maybe before we do that, anybody else about what I've discussed so far? Any other questions? Yes, over here.
I can speak out loud, don't bother.
I think they're recording it, maybe it might be necessary for that. Talk to me anyway. Come on, start.
Hello.
Yes,
thank
hello.
you very much for sharing your studies and learnings with us.
Okay, pleasure.
What do you think, what are your thoughts about the difficulties in practicing clearing the mind?
Yes.
I find it myself, harder than any physical work.
Of course it is. It is one of the hardest jobs we're going to do. So, definitely.
So, what do you think? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, any job you're going to do, you first have to establish that there's some benefit in doing it. So whether it's playing tennis, or, or transforming your mind, you have to know it's possible. You have to get good teachers to show you, and then guess what? You have to persevere. That's the key, isn't it?
For sure, but what I'm aiming is if we're learning the elements of our mind, I was always really fascinated and intrigued by what in my mind is making it so difficult. Yes. I know it's hard work, but maybe you can enlighten it for me.
It's easy, isn't it? Why is it difficult for you to play tennis? What would be a practical reason? What would it be in you that makes it a struggle to play tennis? Simple. It's a simple question. It's not trying to be tricky.
If it's hard on me and I'm not used to it.
No, you're not used to it because you've practiced the opposite for so long. Well, obviously, if you've practiced anger and attachment and jealousy and fear, and Buddha would say for countless lives, that's our default mode. That is truly, it's virtually instinctive right now. So instinctive, feel how deep that is. So to get to that level of change, it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. So I think one of the points I'm making is we need to be really realistic about the job that is needed to be done. And therefore, to know logically it's possible, and then you just keep moving one step at a time. But you have to be confident it's possible. If you're just bashing your head against a brick wall, or you're using the wrong techniques, you'll never ever do anything. You've got to be very practical, But then to not have fantasy expectations, because that's a toxic too. And then we get disappointed, then we give up. So you've got to really have perseverance and be in for the long haul, knowing it's possible, knowing that every single day you work on your mind, even a moment, something is changing. It could even feel like you're getting worse. They say when you start to cultivate meditation skills, this is what the commonest ones, they say it in the text, you think you're getting worse. But you're not getting worse. It's just that you're noticing your mind now. It feels like you're getting worse. And it's like when you go to the gym for the first time. You thought you were healthy and fine sitting watching television every day. Now you start doing you go on the gym and you think you come home with pain all over your body. It's awful, but you're not getting worse. It's a good pain because you're changing. So we've got to have a lot of perseverance, a lot of very grounded, practical, know the techniques, be confident, and then just be humble and patient and never give up. That's the key, I tell you.
Thank you very much. I really understand it better now.
Good. Just behind you there. Yes.
You were talking about negative states.
Yep.
And somewhere you mentioned guilt.
Yes.
You didn't
go into it much. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we all know guilt well, I think, don't we? Yes. I think guilt is actually the same as anger. It is anger, but I'm the object. If I have anger, normally we think of it as I'm going to blame you for something. But you listen to the words of guilt. It's blame. It's exactly the same as anger. You did this and you did that and you're a bad person. What's guilt? I did this, I did that, and I'm a bad person. So it's actually anger, but we're the object. It's a simple way to put it, and I think if you listen to it, and it's very ancient inside us, isn't it? We go to it immediately. As soon as we do a bad thing, that's why when we hear about bad and good, we hear it in the wrong way. So I think it's very deeply ingrained inside us. We have lots and lots of aversion, which is anger. Sometimes I'm the object, which causes also depression. Other people are the object. Sometimes other people are the object, and we have both. So I think that's its characteristic. You listen. You see, one of the key things about being your own therapist, as I like to say, is that when you begin to learn meditation techniques, practical concentration, you learn to literally hear your own thoughts more clearly. And that's the crucial thing. So every one of these emotions, as we call them, anger, fear, depression, guilt, we mainly only feel it at the level of an emotion. You understand? And we can't really articulate how it sounds. But what we need to cultivate with much familiarity with our mind is to go beyond the feeling, beyond the emotion, and to literally catch the thoughts of guilt, the thoughts of anger, the thoughts of depression. In other words, catch them almost like and to write them down, because we need to identify what they think, because they're all basically their thoughts at the deepest level, but they go so quick and we only notice them at the feeling level, through our body and the feeling and the pain, So So it takes time. But they've all got a very clear story. Guilt is a very, if you really hear it carefully, you'll understand it exactly in this way. Jealousy, fears, they're all the same. But they're going so fast in our mind. And we only notice them at the instinctive kind of panic, emotional level. You understand? So we have to unravel them and go beneath into our mind and hear the words that they're saying. Then we really understand their character. And then we can know how to change them.
How do you know that it's not the truth?
This is what we have to discover. And this is the fundamental point that Buddha's making. That, okay, so let's look at an ordinary thing like anger. Let's say, okay, no, let's look at guilt. It's a perfect one. One of the key characteristics that all the neurotic states of mind have, this is a very crucial point in Buddhist psychology, is that they exaggerate the truth. So attachment for the chocolate cake, look at attachment. It's obvious, isn't it, that when you really got an empty stomach and you got this attachment to chocolate cake, the cake looks so delicious, doesn't it? Don't you agree? It looks so divine and it looks utterly irresistible. You understand what I'm saying? And we get really excited. Now that's a complete exaggeration of the truth of the chocolate cake. Look what it looks. Tell me now what it looks like after you've had 4 pieces. It looks now it looks revolting. Now you're so now what's happened? First of all, there was attachment, and which causes the cake to look really delicious. So we get all excited, and then you stuff yourself with it. Now it looks disgusting. So we've changed the attachment now to aversion. So they each are an exaggeration of the facts. The cake is neither delicious in its own nature nor disgusting in its own nature. So what Buddha is saying is all these neurotic emotions, all they embellish, they exaggerate, they distort the truth. So what guilt does is over-exaggerate my badness. Now my mother, I remember being a good Catholic mum of 7 kids, she always had guilt. So that meant, and I remember one time having an argument with her, I got so angry with her. I could see clearly what her guilt was doing. It's like over-exaggerating her role in my life. And I said, excuse me, Mum, I played a role here, I did something, don't you take all the responsibility? So guilt over-exaggerates the badness. You understand what I'm saying? It's self-pity, and it's like a flip side of arrogance. Low self-esteem, which is part of guilt, is, oh, I'm so bad, I did this and I did that. It's exaggerating. You're not that bad. Your anger is bad. Your jealousy is bad. The fact that you killed 20 people is bad. But honey, the rest of you is still good. But we don't see that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? We've got to be far more realistic in looking very realistically at all of our qualities. So there is badness in there. Own it, but don't exaggerate. Guilt exaggerates. Anger, when you do something wrong to me, my anger for you, towards you, will exaggerate your badness. How will you appear to me? I'll think this evil girl, I hate her. Every time I hear your name, I hate you. I get so upset when I think about you. I can't stand looking at you because I paint you with the brush of 1 or 2 bad things you did to me, and I think the whole of you is bad. I'm sorry, it's just not true. Do you see my point? When you're in love with somebody, they look like God incarnate. They're so divine from their head to their toenails. You can see nothing bad. It's an exaggeration. You're not seeing the person in a realistic way. And that's really, I think, we can see. So guilt, it's good to take responsibility for your bad things. That's what we need to do. That's accountability. But not guilt. That's just self-pity. There's no accountability there. We just beat ourselves up. Just like anger is useless. Shouting and yelling and screaming about somebody all the time. There's no benefit in that. But seeing that a person did something wrong, you need to see that. But it's not to exaggerate it. And that it doesn't seem so realistic initially, but it's a really major point. Are you hearing me? So we have to have a lot of clarity in looking into ourselves and being very realistic. But ego doesn't like it. See, all these are the voices of ego. See, the irony of ego is that it's miserable. Ego loves trouble. Ego loves negativity. The voices of ego are guilt, depression, fear, low self-esteem, arrogance, hate, blame, kill. These are the voices and the actions of ego, and they're completely neurotic. They're exaggerated, they're distorted, they're not realistic, they're extreme. We go up and down. Do you understand? So it's really, it does this kind of, internal investigation does need a lot of clarity and real kind of sense of identifying your good qualities and having the courage to identify yourself with them. Because guilt doesn't like seeing good qualities. We don't like seeing our good qualities. We want everybody else to point them out. And we get very hurt if they don't. But I'll ask you your good qualities and we feel embarrassed. But the first thing out of our mouth, we love to say our bad qualities. You understand my point? So this is the irony of ego. It's very caught up in the neuroses, It's addicted to them. And we want to tell everybody else about them and feel bad about them and think about them all the time. 27 people can say you're a good person. One person criticizes you. Which one do you remember? Which one do you run to like a magnet? It's kind of ironic, isn't it? That's how ego works, It's kind of crazy. So it takes courage to see our good qualities. Not arrogant, but practically, because they are there. They have to be there. If they're not, we might as well give up now, Because what we're trying to do here is identify with and cultivate the goodness in us, which is the patience and the love and the forgiveness. It doesn't mean la-di-da in the sky. You still see the world as a terrible place because if you look at the suffering.